Well, good afternoon. Welcome. Good to see you here. My name is Rutger Mollet. I'm the moderator. And it's very great to have you here. And we're ready for your speech. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to our guest, Mr. Lord Hill. And as you all know, he is the EU Commissioner for Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets Union. And we are very delighted to hear you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to join you today. And as an historian, I was very pleased to see that the earliest mention we could find of a public official charged with auditing government expenditure is a reference to the Auditor of the Exchequer in my own country over 700 years ago in 1314. But from being envoys of governments responsible for controlling how local regions were being managed, auditors today have become essential partners to businesses of all sizes, to the point where the economic performance of the professional services industry is itself an indicator of wider economic growth. And I'm happy to see that this sector and the number of jobs that it offers is growing fast. It's good for me to have the chance to talk a bit about the importance of audit and the contribution that it can make to financial stability and to growth. And along with accountancy, it's one of the cornerstones of our financial system. For it is on the judgment of auditors that the entire economy builds its confidence in companies and in markets. Unglamorous perhaps, but it is the rock on which trust is built. And we all know what happened to the house built upon the sand. And unfortunately, we don't need to go back very far in time to find examples of houses built on sand. And it's sometimes hard to put that past behind us when alleged scandals raising questions over the role of auditors continue to surface in the media. So who loses out in those situations? Investors, shareholders, pension scheme, investment fund, or insurance policy? And above all, audit failures reduce trust in companies' financial information. So to build that trust, we need, I think, the values that I read about on the FEE website. The values of integrity, objectivity, of independence, professionalism, competence, and confidentiality. To which I might add that auditors need a good dose of skepticism and of courage. They need to be prepared to speak truth unto power. Now, these are qualities which need to come from within the profession. They're attitudes of mind, standards of conduct, which reflect a determination to do the right thing, not simply to comply with a legal requirement. Regulators can, of course, help in setting the framework, and to help steer that process, I try to follow some simple principles. The principles of transparency, of choice, and of competition. By transparency, I mean that people should have access to good, clear information on which to base their decisions. They should know what the incentives are of a person who's selling them something. Choice, for me, means not being forced to accept certain products or services, but having a real choice of providers, no matter whether or not they or the supplier are located in the same country. And that ties in closely with the third principle, competition, making sure that there are enough players in the marketplace to keep businesses on their toes. A similar emphasis on transparency, on competition, and on choice underpins our plans for the Capital Markets Union. Part of our drive to encourage growth and jobs, I see this as a classic single market project for all 28 member states. And it's also supported by all 28. Last Friday, I was very pleased that ECOFIN agreed its Council conclusions and the way forward. And last week as well, the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs in the European Parliament published a motion for resolution which also supports the project. Alongside that, we've recently finished a consultation on the Capital Markets Union. And the hundreds of responses that we've had, including one from FEE, are a sign of the interest that the Capital Markets Union project has generated. And one message that we're getting from the responses to the consultation is that audit, alongside effective supervision, good corporate governance, and high-quality corporate and financial reporting is crucial to the sound functioning, integrity, and efficiency of capital markets. Auditors have developed expertise that is vital to shareholders and investors in their analysis of companies' health, and this in turn can help strengthen investor trust in the financial information of companies. And this was one of the other messages that FEE gave us in its contribution to the consultation on Capital Markets Union. Overall, the responses made clear that there is a shared analysis of the benefits that a stronger single market in capital would bring by supporting more cross-border risk sharing, creating deeper and more liquid markets, and increasing the resilience of the financial system through diversifying sources of funding. We think that the Capital Markets Union will better link savings with growth. It'll provide more options and better returns for savers and investors. It will offer businesses more choices of funding at different stages in their development. It'll channel investment to where it can be used most productively, increasing the opportunities for Europe's companies and infrastructure projects. And it'll help to ensure that the financial system supports growth and jobs and helps with the demographic challenges that Europe faces. So we're very pleased that our overall aims for the CMU and the various elements that we have identified as necessary to make it happen have received such broad endorsement. Public authorities, market players, issuers and investors also seem positive about the step-by-step approach that we're taking, one that combines ambition with a sense of realism and pragmatism. People want us to be ambitious for the Capital Markets Union, but they also want us to make quick progress where we can, for example, by creating a new market for simple, transparent and standardized securitization, or by reviewing the Prospectus Directive. We're now reflecting on the consultation, and we'll come back in September with an action plan setting out a clear way ahead. And I think we have now a new political opportunity to help improve the conveyor belt of funding for Europe's businesses, and that is an opportunity that I intend to seize. Now, a recognition that we needed to increase transparency and independence in the audit sector lay behind the new rules introduced in the EU last April, in April 2014. And our goal was to boost confidence in financial statements, and we'll achieve these reforms in three main areas. First, by providing better information to investors through more detailed and better audit reports. Second, by increasing auditors' independence by, for example, requiring mandatory rotation or prohibiting certain non-audit services so that they're at less risk of a conflict of interest. And third, by improving the supervision of auditors through greater cooperation between national audit authorities in Europe and ideally through international cooperation. Our reforms have the aim of promoting market diversity and boosting competition. It should give auditors new opportunities to enter the audit and non-audit market by encouraging tendering and joint audits and opening up the market for non-audit services. And I'll be keen to see how this develops, particularly as regards choice in the audit market, as we seek to reduce the risk of excessive market concentration. Another aspect I'll want to keep an eye on is whether measures to encourage tendering or joint audits are taken on board by member states. If so, are they having a positive influence on competition between audit firms? We'll also need to consider how we can best measure the performance of audit committees in their new role with extra responsibilities such as the appointment of audit firms. I also want to check that the new rules are fulfilling their ambition of helping to reduce unnecessary burdens on small and medium-sized enterprises that use auditors' services. Regulation should not dictate in minute detail how auditors should do their job, but I see audit reform as giving them a strong mandate to be independent and to exercise their professional skepticism. And I look forward to seeing that put into practice. Now, to help companies, including small quoted companies, to attract new sources of financing, we need high-quality audit. The adoption of the new rules for more transparency and independence was an important step. But rules will only have the desired effect if they're put into practice. So what we now need is that those rules are implemented quickly and effectively. One of the key issues we need to address is the consistency of implementation of those EU measures at national level. The regulation contains a number of national options, and they include the definition of public interest entities, mandatory firm rotation, the list of non-audit services that an audit firm is prohibited from offering to its audit clients, and the level of the cap on the provision of non-audit services. We hope that different approaches in these key areas will not increase costs and lead to unnecessary additional audit procedures, which could ultimately reduce the positive effects of the reform. To reduce possible inconsistencies, the Commission, as part of the implementation process, is working hard with Member States and national authorities to address practical challenges relating to these new rules. We're working in parallel with the national audit oversight bodies to enhance the supervision of the audit sector within the framework set out by the new rules. In this regard, the new Committee of European Auditing Oversight Bodies that is to be set up by this time next year should have an important part to play. It should make it easier to exchange information, expertise, and best practice, and provide reliable expert advice to the Commission. I also attach a lot of importance to our discussions with the audit profession, companies and investors, to help them anticipate the new rules and to smooth the path to implementation. But when the time is ripe, we will need to assess the impact of these rules and take any further measures that might be necessary to deal with any unintended consequences. Now, our new framework puts the EU at the forefront of wider international developments. I know that several other jurisdictions are very interested in our audit reform, and some might follow us and are keen to learn what impact the reform is having on audit practices and on financial markets. As regards international cooperation on audit oversight, I know that yesterday James Doty was here and he spoke about the many opportunities there are for us to work together on audit, regulation and oversight. Cooperation between our two institutions, between us and the PCAOB, is good and improving, and a lot of progress has been made recently towards a closer partnership on audit oversight. I very much look forward to continuing that cooperation and to making more progress in order to make the process of oversight in the EU and in member states as seamless as possible. While on the topic of areas where we work closely with our international partners, perhaps I could just say a few words about recent developments in accounting. As many of you will have seen, last week we published our report on our findings based on nearly 10 years of using international accounting standards in Europe. And I know that FEE contributed to our public consultation and that you were also represented on the expert group that advised us on our work. So thank you very much for that contribution. Our findings showed that by and large, the experience of using IFRS has been a positive one for Europe. Companies and users of their financial statements are mostly positive about their benefits. But IFRS are not perfect. They're sometimes seen as overly complex and as leading to an overload of financial information. And I've always thought that key messages can be lost by being buried in too much information, just as they can if there is too little information. Generally, the process we're following to bring these standards into EU law is seen to be working well. Now, there's a good degree of consultation with interested partners to help make sure that the standards are of a high quality. But the downside is that all this takes time, and that leads to regulatory uncertainty for companies and also, of course, for their auditors. So we heard in the consultation that the important thing is to focus on having the right influence over the standard setter to ensure that the final standard that emerges is reliable and suitable for use in Europe. Then the process of adopting the standards can go faster and more smoothly. We hope that the governance reform of EFRAG will increase our influence and here I'd like to thank Mark Weissen for his work in representing FEE as the board member of EFRAG. Of course, governance is also an important element in the success of the IASB as a global standard setter, and we look forward to participating in its forthcoming governance review to raise some concerns, including on its funding structure. Now, I've spoken a few times already about transparency and about the need to allow people to make informed choices. Many people criticize international accounting standards for their complexity. However, in many instances, that complexity is unavoidable given the transactions that they're seeking to portray. And we see this in two standards that are currently in the process of being endorsed. First, IFRS 15, which deals with revenue recognition, and that's a more sophisticated standard than the one it replaces. And when we consider the way in which we now rarely buy one thing at a time, we buy an item and it comes with a package of other things, such as a maintenance contract or a warranty or an option to upgrade later, then the updated standard has to reflect this complexity. Then in the case of IFRS 9, financial instruments, I understand that the old standard was criticised for being too complex, to the extent that the chairman of the IASB joked that if you think you understand IAS 39, you haven't read it properly. Well, I hope the same won't be true of IFRS 9. But as with the revenue standard, this standard has a long implementation period to allow companies to put in place the many changes that are needed to meet the new principles. Your role as auditors is key to ensuring that companies implement these changes in their financial reporting so that the objectives of the standards are truly met. And this is where your experience and judgment as professional auditors is so vital in challenging companies to ensure that standards are applied in a disciplined way. The findings of our evaluation showed that financial reporting based on IFRS has increased transparency and comparability across the EU. And this in turn appears to have had beneficial effects on investment as it can contribute to higher liquidity, lower costs of capital, improved investor protection, and also increased cross-border transactions. Clear communication between companies and the investors who risk their money by investing in them is necessary to build trust. And our role in the areas of accounting and auditing is to ensure that the financial reporting systems really contribute to good communication and that the trust in companies is deserved. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm keen to see a healthy and dynamic audit sector in which auditors play their role in helping the economy to grow. The new audit rules are a cornerstone of the EU's financial governance framework. Reliable financial reporting and auditing, effective supervision, and consistent application of the new rules can help our efforts to deepen the single market in capital. The EU efforts are also relevant internationally and can contribute to drive global initiatives to enhance the contribution that audit can make to financial markets. I think it's worth remembering that our ultimate goal is to boost confidence in companies and their financial information, and that is to the benefit of your profession, of investors, and of the wider economy. Europe needs more investment, and in helping to bring that about, you all have a vital role to play. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for addressing this great speech. 1314, that's a real long time ago. Lord Hill, 1314. Is it correct that you're a historian from origin?
Yes. Yeah.
That's funny because James Doty, the guy you mentioned, he's an historian as well. Why do historians all get these great jobs?
Well, I think he probably got his job because he knows quite a lot about the area. I got my job because I was involved in politics. But what history teaches you, I hope, is to take a long view, to have a sense of perspective. History is also great at teaching you about précis, helping you ask the right questions. And what I will try and do in this job, and my overall job of financial regulation, is to ask the right questions. I think history should also give you a sense of skepticism. And I think that's important when you think about financial regulation. And also, it should help you think about the consequences of actions you take in the real world. And so something else I'm very keen to do as I do this job is to work with people in the financial services industry, to develop things together. I'm keen to do things with the industry, not to the industry, and to understand as best we can the effect of the changes that we make. I don't believe you should try and regulate in an ivory tower, cut off from the consequences of what you do. So whether that comes about because of my nature, the country I come from, or because I was a historian, I leave to others to decide, but that is the approach that I will bring to bear.
Thank you for this great answer. Give him a big hand. Lord Hill, great to have you here this afternoon, and really inspiring speech.